Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
The major conflicts areas and tension in center state. That means the conflicts of Indian federalism. So particularly we are talking about the differences of Indian federalism. Now there are some major tension areas, the central government being endowed with greater authority by the constitution and their interference in the administration of the states has caused major strains in the state. Let us talk about few of it, like President Gulen dismissing us, having majority in the assembly, ending and dissolving the assembly, chance to the opposition government, allowing the opposition to form government even after the defeat of a minister. So let us talk about all these in detail. Like Constitution of India at one hand, recognized and separately identity of the regions, and on the other hand gives more power to the center. And once the principle of identity of the state is accepted, quite natural that the states would expect control and powers in the governance of the state and the country as a whole. So this leads to various demands from the states from time to time. States have demanded that they should be given more powers, but the problem is that they wanted more autonomy as well. But this leads to tensions and conflicts in the relations between the center and the state. Of the issues between center and state are I'll just see the dismissing a state's government having majority, then the suspension and not giving a chance to opposition to form the government. So state also wants some more powers which are not given to them. Let us talk about legislative relations. If I talk about the legislative relations between central and government and the state government are concerned, central government has given exclusive power. They are upper hand. They have exclusive powers. Then they have the powers to make law on the subjects of union, and these subjects are of great importance of the country and the uniform character. So these subjects are given to the union government, and the state governments can make laws on the subjects mentioned in the state list only. So the subjects which are of local importance may vary from state to state. So some subjects of the state list are law and order, public health, and forest, revenue, sanitation, etc. So the state governments have power to pause on these subjects. For example, during the period of emergency, Parliament makes. When it is emergency, Parliament makes the law on the state subject. And we find that in legislative manner, the Union Parliament is more powerful. So if we talk about these legislative powers, now let me tell you few administrative relations also. Like as in legislative relation, in administrative matters also, central government has been made more power. Why the Constitution has made it clear that the state government cannot go against the central government and in administrative manner. So the state government have to work under the supervision of central government. They cannot take, they are not that much liberal to take independent decisions. And then let's talk on financial relations also. To run the administration properly, both the central and the state governments need adequate sources of income in the form of taxes and all. So the income of the government comes mainly from various taxes, as I said. So, and there are certain taxes like land revenue, tax on agricultural income, estate duty, etc. So which are levied and collected by the state. They are the sources of state revenue. Some taxes are like stamp duty, excise on medicine, and etc. and which are levied by the union, but collected and appropriated by the state. And there are some other taxes also which are source of income of union all alone. and they are revenue earned from railways, post, telegraphs, and wireless broadcasting. So, in financial matters also, central government is more powerful. And if I talk about the President of India, he has the power to make alterations in the distribution of revenues earned from income tax between the centre and the then demands for provincial autonomy as well. Demands for provincial autonomy is like the cultural and the linguistic issue. Then the power concentration, financial autonomy, and the administrative. Then the role of government and president rule in states. The role of governors have also been controversial issues between states and the central government. Firstly, being the parliamentary system, he has been assigned the role of constitution head, and the secondly, he has been given powers an agent of the center to defend the unity and autonomy of the country under federal. And until there were governments of the same party in states as well as in the center, the post of governor remained out of control. But when there will be two different parties in power at center and state, what would be the role of the state government? And would be question to be decided by the constitutional experts. So this became quite apparent very initial stages in free India in 1992. The first general election when no party got absolute majority. So it was the governor proclaimed the president's rule there, and later on help Congress party to form the government. And in 1957, in the state of Kerala, the Communist Party formed its government after seeking their majority in the elections in 1957. And the misuse of powers in recommending president's rule by the governor has also reached to such an extent that Supreme Court, which till then did not interfere in such, taking as political decisions stated in its decision on 11th March 1994. And beyond a certain limit, the use of Article 356. During the recent years, the governors never misused their discretionary powers, and the reason behind this is perhaps the decision of Supreme Court, or the very nature of the central government has changed on the instability in the center. This question perhaps may be answered in. Now let's move to the suggestions for improving center-state relations. If I talk about these center-state relations, there are few suggestions also given by the people. Some before I start this, they have some conflicts. If I start this improving center and state relation, they have border disputes also. They have water disputes. Such type of conflicts, like I talk about border disputes. These disputes are being arised between two neighbor states, and the main reason behind its language. First of all, we take the conflict between Punjab and Haryana. Both these states have common capital and Chandigarh, and are separate states as such. This connection or compromise formula was suggested in 1995 also, and according to which Chandigarh was to given to. And the border dispute was a root cause of violent insurgency between Manipur and Nagaland. 4 districts of Manipur and Naga language are in majority, and they are demanding. There is a city of Karnataka also, Belgaum, where the majority consists Marathi speaking people, hence they want to assemble in Maharashtra. At the same time of formation of Jharkhand, a conflict arose for the Orissa language speaking and Kharsavan and Saraidela areas. And however, in this state, the Bangla speaking persons are also in great. Now, there are few disputes of water disputes also, many large Indian rivers over different states. So, it is a natural that conflicts may arise between sharing of river water, because they are related to the problems of drinking water and agriculture in the concerned state. And for the purpose, a water dispute tribunal was also set up for the distribution of water in Krishna River conflict and March. Earlier, big conflict has emerged over the Narmada water amongst Gujarat, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh. Rivers are major resources, and disputes over river waters test the patience and cooperative states. Now, since some of the states felt aggrieved, these asserted themselves, as said earlier in 19 West Bengal. Joy Mukherjee created such situation that the central government was obliged to recall Governor Dharamveera 1979, Charan Singh governments promulgated preventive detention. But central state governments refused to implement its provisions. South Indian states could create a situation compelling central government to assure them that Hindi would not be introduced in states till these were ready to accept it. But centre has failed to resolve Chandigarh issue because of its failure to produce a formal acceptable vote to Haryana and Punjab. But it has failed to solve water and boundary disputes in Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Haryana and Punjab. As I have just talked about all these disputes and such disputes as well existing in Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Kerala. Such instances on the part of state create difficult situation and amicably solving. Then it was also suggested that the Finance Commission on itself only, statutory very limited, to enable it to play its role very effectively. Discretionary funds should also be placed at its disposal. A suggestion was also made that the central government follow the policy of least interference in the affairs of the state, give comparatively free hand financial and administrative matters. It was suggested that the centre should give a policy of discipline and dictating the states, but should work on the principle. Even interstate disputes could also be referred to the Council for Settlement. That the decision should be binding no matter whether these fit to the part or not. Another suggestion made that financial resources of and that the states become financially less dependent on them. About the Sarkaria Commission was gaining correct. And 1981, a meeting of parties held in Srinagar demanded that radical changes should be brought about in elections in 19. And Janata Party government in Karnataka brought out a white paper on. Accordingly, on March 24, 1983, government announced appointment of Sarkari. Accordingly, on March 24, 1983, government the appointment of commission under Justice R.S. retired judge of the Supreme Court, review existing arrangements between the center and the state in the context of one hand keeping an interview. Now the reference of the commission was examine and review the working of existing arrangement between unions regard to our powers, functions and responsibilities. Because powers and functions and responsibility in all the sphere. To recommend appropriate changes and other measures to existing. It was also recommended in 1988 that it was not proper to curtail the powers of the Senate as a strong Senate for presenting integrity of the country. That means why it was being strong to present the integrity of the country. In view of the commission, there was no need for making drastic changes to existing of the constitution, as these have all along with the stood stress and stress of the changes. In the financial sphere, there was no need for major changes in the basic scheme as provided in the constitution. Not want to change anything. And it favored some amendments to provide for sharing of corporation tax and levy of consignment tax on advertisement and broadcast. Not favor transfer of any subject from central to the state. Still, the central government is more powerful. It is upper hand. And it favored deployment of central forces in consultation with the state government. No changes was needed in Article 246 of the Constitution. It did not favor the idea of abolition of the office of the governor and also the idea that the governor and state government, however, favored the idea that the governor should be appointed in the consultation with the chief minister of the government. So the governor should appoint only such person as chief minister who was either the leader of majority party in the assembly, commander of party in the assembly, which he would be asked to prove within 30 days. And it did not favor deletion of Article 350 of the Constitution, but suggested number of steps to ensure that the power would be rarely used, and no state assembly could be dissolved unless Parliament has approved the proclamation that before position of President's rule. So the possibilities of forming an alternative. Now let's talk about Article 370. The Constitution mainly states that no act of reply matter relating to religious or social practices. Nagas and Naga customary law and procedure administration criminal justice involving this. According to Naga law and transfer of land as resources, the legislative solution act to applicable to the governor is given special responsibility. Article 371 BSM, according to which the special provision under President may provide for the constitution and functions of a committee, legislative assembly of state consisting of members elected from tribal areas of. And 371C, and in this case of Manipur, is similar to 371B. Here too, the president may provide for the constitution and functions of a committee of legislative of the state, but consisting of members elected from hill areas of Manipur. Andhra Pradesh 371DE, which added to the constitution and is equitable opportunity from the year 1994 for the state and save rights in the matters of. And the state government may organize civil post or direct recruitment cadre as required. And Article 371E states that the Parliament may be law provide for the establishment. Article 3. Article 370 regarding Jammu. I would say no law passed by the Parliament can be applied to the state without the order of in concurrence of the state. Such condition exists in the case of other states in Kashmir, and the provisions of Article 20 were described as temporary. The agreement of 1970 signed between Sheikh Abdullah and Gandhi was agreed upon that Abdullah will give up the demand of plebiscite and special status of, and it would no longer remain a temporary measure. But the agreement could not be implemented owing to the difference. Jammu and Kashmir is the only state in the country having a constitution union, and the important provisions of the constitution of Jammu and Kashmir, territory of Jammu and Kashmir, as which were the sovereignty of erstwhile, and these areas include that territory is at the present out of 123 assemblies, 5 allotted to and remain vacant because the situation. Though the executive and legislative powers of the state for the entire state, those areas which come to the jurisdiction, all rights which are guaranteed. The majority of not less than 2/3 of members of the House can amend the constitution by passing a. The schedule of the sixth schedule for the Northeast, according to Article 246 schedule, lays down special provisions for the protection of the cultural identity. Hill tribe. Important provisions of sixth schedule in creation of the autonomous. While tribals of some of the northeastern have the Arunachal Pradesh, Naga, greater part of do not have the inner lines regulation of 3 states, and that is the Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, and North Kachar district of. And the modern institution of the autonomous council, they are controlled by the new generation, and which has benefited from the modern of education. The new light in the have considered it as an encroachment on the position. In fact, they have been demanding. Tribals have been seeking the removal of the autonomous. They argue that the sixth schedule was introduced to protest the interest of the tribals while they would constituents of, but with the formation. Besides, there is no clear result in overlapping of the legislation. Since the British day system of line was under the Bengali 73, it prohibits the travel of outsiders into the area beyond the inner of the government, and aimed primarily protecting the protecting the people of the covered area for the exploitation of, and this also preserved the British control that are hindered the integration. The line is subject of hot control. Let's conclude the chapter of federalism. Indian structure of government is federal with some government, and the union and state follow. Not in strict sense, full of district powers is followed in India, and this makes India a federal country of its for easy convenience. It is described as quasi federal country.